Good evening and welcome to Valley Beth Shalom on Monday night. Tonight we're going to be talking about wine. Now it is a custom, of course, a wonderful custom at the Passover Seder to celebrate our liberation from bondage with 4 cups of wine. And many families, including my own, have maintained a custom of drinking sickeningly sweet Manischewitz Concord grape wine. So the first thing I want you to know, I'm Ed Feinstein. I'm senior rabbi at Valley Beth Shalom. I'm an instructor and lecturer at the American Jewish University. I'm ordained from the Jewish Theological Seminary, where I hold a doctorate in education. And if I tell you quite seriously that nowhere in the corpus of the Jewish faith are you commanded to drink bad wine. And these days, we have the opportunity to drink wonderful wines as Passover is coming. Now, there's nothing wrong with Manischewitz. The reason we drink Manischewitz is when we first came to America, the only grapes we could find in upstate New York were Concord grapes. And Concord grapes, despite the title, are kind of awful. And in order to make them drinkable, you have to dump a lot of sugar in it. In fact, there's a winery in the Lower East Side called Shapiro's. And on the side of the building, it says Shapiro's wine, so sweet you can cut it with a knife. You can do better. You can do better. And in fact, I would suggest that having good wine at your Seder table and fulfilling the custom of 4 whole cups will make for a much happier and sweeter Seder. So tonight, we're joined by a dear friend. Please welcome Cantor Keith Miller. Keith is my wine connection. Keith is a cantor in the community, and he has turned his wonderful love of wine and love of travel into a new career, and it's called DCantor. I'm not making that up. That's really the name of the company. And tonight, Keith has brought us some wonderful wines to taste for Pesach, and each wine carries a story because they come from the 4 corners of the world. So, Keith, welcome. It's really great to have you.
Thank you, Rabbi Feinstein. Very nice to be here with you and with your wife, of course.
Nina's here, too. There she is. Good.
Hi.
Good. Keith, tell us a little bit about Pesach wine this year.
Well, it's a wonderful year to drink good wine. We need a distraction for sure. There's so many things going on in the world that it could not be a better time to drink delicious wines, not just during Pesach, but throughout the year. So we wanted to find wines that represent different parts of the world and perhaps present different flavors and different experiences. So we can do that through wine. When we taste wine, we really are tasting a part of the past. We're tasting the land. We're tasting the terroir. And so I hope that we have succeeded, and we'll find out shortly. And as we walk through different wines here of the world.
All right.
Okay. So I thought we would start first thinking again with the number 4, and of course that's the appropriate number, as you mentioned, for the Seder. We have many 4s. So the first 4 will be a wine that I always like to start tasting with, and that is a sparkling wine. So I'm going to pour that for us, and then we'll taste it, and I'll talk a little bit about it. This is from a winery called Borgo Real, and Borgo Real is it's actually a brand that is an import brand from a company called Allied, and they bring in different kosher wines for the American and international customer. And I like sparkling wine to start all tastings, and I think it's great to start Pesach. I always like to joke that this is a wine that pairs very well with the Karpas course during the Seder, and it's a Prosecco. It comes from Italy. Prosecco is the name of a town. It's also the name of a grape. It can also be referred to as glera. And it's made in what is referred to as charmat. So it's made a little bit differently than champagne. Wines that are Prosecco wines are made in pressurized tanks. So after the very first alcoholic fermentation, it goes through a second fermentation. And that second fermentation, yeast and sugar is added to a big container called an autoclave. It's pressurized, it's closed, and they add this additional amount of yeast and sugar. And then all of the CO2 is trapped inside these vast container, generally stainless steel containers. And so that's where the bubbles come from. And it's a little bit of a lighter expression of sparkling wine. It's not quite as yeasty. It's not quite as toasty as you might see in champagne. So it's a little bit more approachable, and of course it's used in a lot of champagne style cocktails and mimosas that we'll add in different juices and things like that, often for Sunday brunch, that type of thing. But I think it's a wonderful way to start the Seder. It's important also to know, Rabbi, as you know, during the Seder, that we don't just have a little bit of wine, that we can continue to enjoy that first glass of wine throughout that first part of the Seder. So I think it pairs with a lot of different foods very easily. So let's try this. This is, again, it's a sparkling wine.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen l'chaim. We can't touch. We just have to drink.
Oh, that's right. Exactly.
And it's very light, very refreshing. It's not as sweet. Sometimes the Proseccos are very sweet.
They can be.
This one is actually a little drier, but it's beautiful. It's a lovely wine.
It's a Brut style. So depending on the style that the winemaker is attempting to transmit, there can be certain levels of sugar. So this is Brut, which translates into about 4 grams per liter. So there's a little bit of sugar, but it's not an overly sweet wine. There's some people that really like very sweet wine, and that is just a preference. There are some champagnes and other sparkling wines that are referred to as Brut Natural or Brut Nature, which means there's literally no sugar added. So they are bone dry, very, very dry. But this is, I think it's approachable. It is very refreshing. You get a little bit of pear note on that, and it's just a very, very fun wine.
Now, Nina, you usually like the sweeter wines. Tell me how you like this one.
I actually like it very much, and I was surprised because I do like a sweeter Prosecco, but it is really refreshing, and I can taste that little note of pear in it. There is a slight sweetness to it, but it's really a wonderful, very crisp,
yes,
and refreshing drink.
It is.
Keith, show us the bottle so people can take a look.
And so again, this is a brand called Borgo Real.
There you go.
And so if you can see that, and it's again brought in from an importer named Allied, and they created this brand specifically for export market. And the grapes come from all over the Prosecco. There are 9 different provinces in Italy that grow these grapes, and the wine is made at a winery called Danelli, which is a winery that was initially established at the turn of the 20th century. So it's been around for a very long time. They've been making wines, Italian wines, for a very long time. This is a non-vintage, so you won't see a year on this wine. So the style, they're trying to recreate the style year in and year out. It's not it's certainly not a particularly expensive wine. It's a very moderately priced.
What is you normally look for?
So I sell this wine for $18, which is a good Jewish number, and I think it's a fair price for what I think is a very wonderful way to start the Seder.
And it's a kosher wine.
All of the wines are kosher that we'll be tasting today. They're all kosher, and all kosher for Passover. It's not economically wise for wineries to make wines that might be kosher then not kosher for Passover.
Right.
So generally, when the wine is introduced into the market, it will be both kosher and kosher for Passover.
So let's take a moment and talk about that, because this is an interesting case of Jewish words, basically. So food is kosher, of course, because it abides by a certain set of rules which are both biblical and rabbinic. Meat in particular. If you're a vegan or a complete vegetarian, you don't have to worry about kosher. You're automatically kosher. But food becomes kosher when we introduce meat, slaughtering animals and preparation and serving of meat. Wine is kosher for a very different reason. There's no pork in wine, God forbid. That's not what makes wine unkosher. Wine is kosher because it was produced under the supervision of the Jewish community. And you can imagine what the problem was in the early days of Christianity, when the Christian community began using wine in their rites. And even before that, when pagan communities used wine, the rabbis and leaders of the community didn't want Jews accidentally or on purpose participating in pagan or Christian rites using wine. So they said the wine you use must be produced and supervised by the Jewish community. And that's what we mean by a kosher wine, Then kosher for Passover means that there's nothing in it that would make it chumatzdik. It's interesting that you can put yeast in wine.
You can, and depending where the yeast is grown, that could present an issue.
And that's
so
the
if
issue.
if the yeast strains perhaps come in contact with or are grown on carbonates, then you might have an issue there.
So kosher wine is wine that has been produced under Jewish auspices, and kosher for Pesach wine means that you can use it at your Seder. So this was a delicious beginning, Prosecco, and it's called, once again, the company is, the winery
again, it's called Borgo Real.
Borgo Real. Wonderful, thank you. Okay, let's move now onto the Seder itself. And what's our next wine going to be?
Well, I was thinking about my Seder at home, and a lot of times I might be one of the few people at my Seder that really enjoy gefilte fish. A lot of people in my family, and I know that they're watching now, are not big gefilte fish fans. So I generally eat about 3 or 4 pieces of gefilte fish at my Seder, and I have any number. There are a lot of different wines, of course, that we could have selected. But Rabbi Feinstein, I know from just our years of knowing each other that you are a big fan of a wine from Israel, specifically from the Tish B Winery, and that is the Emerald Riesling. And I know you also like the French Riesling, both of those wines. So the French Riesling I've not found in our domestic market here, unfortunately, but I have had success finding the Emerald Riesling. So Emerald Riesling is a grape that was created by scientists at UC Davis, and it was created a while ago in the 1940s. I think specifically 1948, obviously a key year in our modern Jewish history. And then it was brought to Israel. It's a clone of 2 different grapes. The 2 different grapes are Riesling and Muscadel. And the scientists were looking for a grape that would succeed like a Riesling, but in a warmer climate. Riesling is often grown in Alsace, in a very cold region of France, and it's France, Germany, and it's a difficult grape to grow in warmer climates. So they cloned it together with the Muscadel to create this grape, and as it so happens, it was brought in the 70s to Israel, and so Israel has most of the plantings now of this grape called Emerald Riesling. It's a wine that is grown and is completed in a style that is off dry. So I know that this is a favorite of yours and of Nina's, of course. And let's taste some actually while we're talking about it.
So I'll tell you our connection with this wine in the summertime. It's been our privilege, Nina and me, to study at the Hartman Institute in Jerusalem. And one of the years we were there, we took a trip, a little field trip, just a group of us, 4 of us, up to Rishon LeZion, and then up to Zichron Yaakov. And Zichron Yaakov, which is in the middle of Israel right now, it's the wine capital, basically, of Israel, because the Carmel winery is there as well. And the Yaakov was Jacob Rothschild, who planted the Carmel winery. The Tish B family arrived shortly after Rothschild and established a winery there in the 1870s. And it's a marvelous place. And they have a cafe. And I really recommend this. If you find yourself in Israel, go to Zichron, go to the Tish B Cafe, and order this wine. It is remarkable. It is such a beautiful wine for a warm summer afternoon to have a light lunch and a wonderful time. And then also, I'll tell you, as long as you're on the wine, when you finish the wine, the Aldo ice cream shop #1 is also in Zichron. So you have a chance to really imbibe Jewish history.
Is that Aldo of the same family?
The Aldo, Aldo ice cream shop in Israel. So this is a Tish B.
It's from Tish B. So I wanted to actually just to share interesting. The family name Tish B was not the original name. So there were 2 husband and wife that were sent by Baron Edmund de Rothschild to go to this area right outside of Zichron Yaakov called Shveya. And the family was Michael and Michal Chamelitsky. And he sent them there specifically to start to grow grapes because, of course, Edmund de Rothschild was a very prominent, he was, the benefactor. That was sort of his nickname, to settle and to grow grapes for the domestic market that would be there in Palestine before the state was established, and then eventually to export to Jews around the world. And so there's a very interesting story that is told when the very famous Israel's national poet Chaim Nachman Bialik came to the family, and they welcomed him there. They welcomed Bialik to their residence and to the winery, and he was so taken with their hospitality. He was so touched by the warmth that he suggested that they change their name from Chamelitsky to Tish B. And Tish B is an acronym, and it stands for Toshav Shveya B'Yisrael, a resident of the town of Shveya in Israel. And so from his very poetic way of renaming them comes the name Tishbi. So the town of Shveya has a very important place in my heart, and I know in your heart, because that's where, and in Nita's heart, in all of our hearts, for all of us who went on the LA Opan program back in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and beyond, and we stayed at the agricultural high school there in Shveya, and it was a very, very wonderful place, Kfar Meir Shveya, a fantastic place where we stayed and we ate and we got to work. We worked in the potato fields and all kinds of things. And so I remember they had programs where they would send us out. Did you study? I didn't do too much studying. Oh, okay. Yeah, some of us studied. I'm just kidding.
Nina studied.
Yes, exactly. That's why you're a rabbi and I'm not.
Yeah,
I remember. So I was looking through some old photographs, and I remember a time when I had gone I think they had taken us into the town of Zichron to look at some of the businesses there, and I actually found this picture of myself. I wanted to share this with you. Working at the Carmel Winery in Zichron when I was 15 years old. And this is here with one of the workers at the bottling line. And that's me in a former weight category as a young 15-year-old. And we worked at the Carmel Winery. So my interest in wine, I suppose, was born at that time. So Shveya is a very important place, certainly, as Rabbi Feinstein mentioned, a place where there are many, the roots and the history of Israel's older vineyards and wineries was established.
So let's try this one. I know this is a wonderful wine.
So this
L'chaim.
is L'chaim.
L'chaim. L'chaim. That's wonderful. It's light. It's refreshing. It's a little sweet.
A little bit of nectarine, a little bit of melon.
Yep.
On this, it's sort of an off-dry, so not overly sweet, but would pair, again, as I was saying before, with gefilte fish, with some of the lighter introductory courses to the Seder. And I love this wine. This is a wine you can drink, certainly throughout the Seder. When at my Seder table, I generally have several wine glasses set up. So I'm going back and forth. I know some of my family can relate because it gets a little crowded around my plate, but I'm trying lots of different wines and pairing with lots of different courses because there's always so much food.
So on a summer afternoon, you can go through a bottle of this pretty quick.
Yes.
Because it's just a delicious wine
Most
with
definitely.
a light lunch and some good friends.
Yes.
and a wonderful atmosphere. L'chaim.
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 It's unfortunate we can't actually clink glasses. The reason, one of the reasons that we clink glasses is because wine is enjoyed with all of our senses. We see it, we smell it, we can touch it, but we can't hear it. So the idea that we clink our glasses together brings in the sense of hearing. So we just have to hear our voices today, and we'll yearn for a time that we can clink our glasses very soon.
Amen. So the four cups at your Seder are really the marking places in the telling of the Seder story. The first cup introduces the day. It's Kiddushat Hayom. It's the cup that you make Kiddush over. And then you tell the story. You listen to the four questions from the child at the table, and you tell the story of the Exodus from Egypt. We'll sing Dayenu together. And then the second cup is a cup over the bracha is over history, over Geula, over the power of redemption to redeem us through history, the power of God to bring redemption to history. So the second cup of wine is our cup of history. Then we have dinner. And after dinner, the wine that we drink right after dinner is the wine that we say Birkat Hamazon over. It's the cup of gratitude. It's the cup that says thank you for all the bounty of our blessings. And then we finish the Seder, we sing Elia Navi, We welcome Elijah into our homes. We recite the tradition of Jewish dreams for a world redeemed, Exodus of tomorrow, and not just Exodus of yesterday. And we finish with the fourth cup, a cup of hope. So we've come 2 cups so far, Keith. Now let's go to the third cup, which is the cup of gratitude, the cup of wine that we're going to drink over dinner. So we're going to be having, we'll start, of course, with the gefilte fish, and we had the Riesling, and then we'll have the soup, and then we'll go to, I guess, brisket and chicken and tzimmus and the whole schmear. This better be a good wine, a strong wine.
This is a.
What have you brought for us tonight?
So, as you mentioned, I love brisket, and sometimes we'll do. I remember when I was younger, even my mom might make tongue. So that was always something that we would have, and you certainly need you certainly need something that can pair well. And so I brought a red wine, and also just in keeping with the theme of having wines from around the world, we brought a wine from South Africa. Now, many people are, who've not been to South Africa may not be familiar with the fact that there's a great history of grape growing in South Africa that dates back all the way to the 15th century. Dutch emigres settled there, and they brought certain customs, and amongst that would be planting grapes that they would enjoy. And there are many wonderful wines from South Africa, and there are any number of different kosher wineries now that are making wines. So the wine that I brought for our third meat course is from a very well-known winery called Becksburg. It's a four generations of grape growing in South Africa, and the winery is in the Paarl region, which is right next to Stellenbosch. And this grape here is thought of really as the national grape of South Africa, and this is a grape called Pinotage. So I'm going to pour that and talk a little bit about the Pinotage.
So we know this winery because some years ago, Nina and I were invited to participate in an international festival of Jewish learning in South Africa, in Cape Town and Joburg and Durban. And when one of the days off, we took a wine tour around Cape Town, and they brought us to Becksburg. And it's a marvelous place, a beautiful winery, very generous people. They were very excited to have rabbis on the premises because they do make a line of non-kosher wines, but they do make this wonderful line of kosher wines. And it was just wonderful. And they were so excited they kept refilling our glasses, which only made the tour better. So let's enjoy.
Absolutely. So the family is the Back family. They were Lithuanian immigrants to South Africa. And initially they were growing all kinds of different agricultural products, grapes and other fruits. They were raising cattle as well. And eventually they sold this. They had established a winery called Back. They sold it due to some economic issues, and then the winery was sort of reinvented and rebranded as Becksburg. So this is now run by Michael and Simon Back, and this is their winery. And as you said, they're growing and having wine that is both kosher and not kosher. So these wines are certainly all kosher. So the grape Pinotage is an interesting grape. They were looking in South Africa for a grape that would succeed in the climate, and eventually they sent a scientist, someone who was very familiar with grape growing, sent him to Europe to try to discover or perhaps even clone a grape. And this scientist was a fellow by the name of Perold, Abraham Isaac Perold. It happened to be a Jewish scientist, and he was from Stellenbosch University. And he figured out that if you clone two different grapes, the Pinot Noir grape and a grape called Cinsault, which at the time was referred to there as Hermitage. So that's where you get the name Pinotage from Pinot Noir and Hermitage, Pinotage. So it's a grape that does very, very well in this climate. It's not grown in too many other places. There are plantings of Pinotage actually in Israel, but the vast majority of Pinotage is from South Africa. You get some pretty good tannin, so it'll work well with meat courses, and sometimes with the fat, it will pair very nicely. One of the most important pairing notes or tasting notes of this grape is banana. So you get maybe a little bit of banana. It is, I think, a great wine. It's a workhorse wine. It can really pair with lots of different meats and works very well. So let's say l'chaim to this.
L'chaim.
L'chaim.
Oh, that's very good. That's a big one. That's a big red. Ooh. If you like Merlot, you're gonna like this.
It is. It's got some great structure to it. It really fills your mouth with a lot of flavor.
Yeah.
Get a little bit of blackberry, a little bit of that banana.
Right.
The winery itself is very concerned about producing sustainable wines and doing things in a environmentally friendly way. So the glass that they use is a little bit of a lighter glass. So when the wine is shipped, it costs much less money to ship large pallets of wine. The winery itself is a carbon neutral winery, environmentally friendly winery, and they're doing lots of things, trying to be very careful with the environment and not using pesticides and things like that in the winery. So once again, the Becksburg Kosher for Passover Pinotage.
How much does this one go for?
We sell this for $17.50.
Not bad.
Yeah. They have kosher sparkling wine, and they also have kosher Chardonnay.
Yeah.
And we're big fans of their Pinotage.
Yes, wonderful. That's really wonderful.
Yeah.
The South African Jewish community was once a powerful community, and unfortunately, the politics of the country have made it more and more difficult to sustain Jewish life. But there still is a very lively and wonderfully warm Jewish community in South Africa. So there's a chance to support a Jewish community that's in somewhat trouble, at the same time enjoying a wonderful wine at your Seder table. This was just great.
Isn't that great? Yeah.
Wonderful wine. A great wine for the Seder table.
Yeah.
So we've had a Prosecco, a lovely, refreshing Prosecco. We've had that wonderful Emil Riesling, which is a light and sweet, not too sweet, but a wonderful beginning of a meal wine.
Yes. This
This is a big red, a big, powerful red for dinner.
Yep.
And now we'll finish the Seder. We'll welcome Elijah. Elijah's come a long way. And I think he deserves a good glass of wine if he's visiting California, if he's visiting North America. So what have you got for us for Eli Novi as a fourth cup of wine, Keith?
That's a big lead up. So when we're finishing the Seder and we're having our dessert, there are lots of fantastic desserts. I know many of my family and certainly myself look forward to all kinds of wonderful kosher for Passover desserts. My sister-in-law makes amazing chocolate-covered matzah, and there are just lots of sweet desserts. So along with having a sweet dessert, you want a wine that is also sweet. So the sweet will not be overwhelming, and you want to really pair a sweet dessert with a sweet wine. So we have a fantastic dessert wine that we are presenting, and this is from Canada.
Canada.
So Canada is known specifically for producing something called ice wine, and ice wine is something that originated in Germany and Austria, but really has been taken over, and some of the best ice wines in the world are now made in the Ontario wine region in Canada. Now, of course, it gets very, very cold there, and so the interesting thing about ice wine is these are grapes that are not picked until the first freeze comes. So you have snow and freezing temperature, and what will happen to these grapes is the water itself will freeze, but not the sugars, and that's when the grapes are picked and they're pressed. So each grape is producing far less amount of juice than a regular grape, and so that's why typically these are wines that are fairly expensive, and the bottles are much smaller because there's a much more expensive process. And I've seen videos with people who are working in the winery, and they are out in the vineyard, and it's literally freezing. It's freezing, and they're out in all of their winter gear and doing the harvest. So it's really quite an amazing process, and the entire winery has to be kept very, very cold. And you have this fantastic sweet nectar. It tastes something like caramel. It is really just remarkable. One of my very close friends is a rabbi, also in the community, and this is his wife's absolutely favorite wine in the world. and she enjoys it very much. So
The name of the winery is?
So the name of the winery is Safona, which of course means north, and it certainly is a northern area. They make any number of different wines. They do some white wines and actually some red wines, but this to me is their the top of their cuvée, if you will, their ice wine. This is made from a grape called Vidal, which again is another clone grape. It's sort of a clone of an Uni Blanc, which is an Italian grape, and you're going to taste it. You'll just taste the lusciousness. It really is something very, very special.
Cheers.
L'chaim, cheers.
L'chaim. Wow.
Good. So there are lots of ice wines that are produced in Canada. Probably the most famous is a winery called Inniskillen. So they make all kinds of different ice wines from various different grapes. I had the good fortune to actually visit that winery, and it's amazing. We tasted all kinds of ice wines made from many different kinds of grapes, from Cabernet Franc and from Chardonnay, and this is made from Vidal, which is a grape really very appropriately suited to ice wine. So here,
L'chaim. L'chaim.
It's really syrupy.
It is. It has that sort of syrupiness. There's a little bit of red wine in our glass. So generally, it's not. Yeah, it's not actually that color. It's not quite as dark as that. But again, you get some like creme brulee and caramel and peach.
Delicious.
And you're having this with your sweeter dessert. So that it's not something generally that you would just drink alone, but pairing it with something sweet.
What about cheese? Could you have it with cheese?
Yeah, this would be good if you were a milk McMeal. Yeah, it'd be great over ice cream. Actually,
it would be delicious over ice cream, over some
vanilla
ice cream, and just pour it over.
Yeah, it would be terrific.
Or also with chocolate. I paired it with like a dark chocolate, and it worked really, really well.
Or even sherbet, you could put it on.
You could, absolutely. This wine is also a vegan-friendly wine, which means that all of the fining agents that are used are do not have any animal products in them. Depending on the winery and how they decide to filter and fine their wine, there can be various animal products that are used, and this is a vegan-friendly wine, so they're using things like clay bentonite, nothing that comes from an animal. So a vegan, kosher for Passover wine.
Wonderful, wonderful. And what does this go for a bottle?
$35.
Usually they're expensive. Yeah. That's wonderful. Yeah, wonderful wine.
It's delicious.
Well, Keith, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing these wines with us. Once again, let's take a look at each bottle so we remember what we tasted today. Okay, we started with the Borgo Real Prosecco.
Yep.
Right? And then the Tish B Emerald Riesling. This is one of my favorite wines.
Don't drop it.
Careful.
Don't drop it. And then the Becksburg Pinotage from South Africa. And finally, the Canadian Safona delicious ice wine. So it's remarkable now that there's Jewish communities in all corners of the world making delicious wines.
Yeah.
And that gives us the opportunity to taste all of the love of these communities as we sit down to our Pesach Seder. I want to wish you and your family a wonderful Pesach. Let us hope that this plague lifts soon, and that we all get to cross the Red Sea in peace and hold hands as we do it. Amen. Right, before we go, I'm going to give you a little time to make a commercial. The name of the company is?
So we are DCantor Enterprises, d-Cantor, CANTOR.com, and we have lots of different kosher wines, so you can go on the website and order kosher wine. You can also just email me directly, info@d-Cantor.com, and we can ship or deliver in a very environmentally safe way, no contact, to you before the holiday. So I hope, and we sell all kinds of wine, but right now we're just focused during this time on kosher for Passover wines.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Keith. It's wonderful to spend a few minutes with you. Thank you. And thank you, Nina, for sharing the wine. And I want to thank all of you for being with us. Monday nights, Valley Beth Shalom presents Ways of Living Jewishly Just Better. And thank you to Keith for bringing sweetness to our Yontif table. Once again, enjoy a sweet and happy holiday. We will be putting up online opportunities, resources for getting ready for Passover, and opportunities to make your Seder better. I know many families are worried about, how am I going to do a Seder separated from children, separated from parents, separated from family members. We're going to have virtual Seders up online. We're going to have materials to make your Seder wonderful, and a couple of bottles of really good wine can't hurt. So thank you so very much. Have a lovely evening and take good care. Pay attention to our website at VBS at home at vbs.org for all the programs that we're offering, and join us all week as we continue to explore Jewish life together. Stay safe and stay well and stay healthy.
You know what else you could do?